Hi, it's Desiree, Desbot from the Nerd Element. I'm here with Brendon Small from Metalocalypse. They've got a whole new movie. I actually have my, oh, you can't see it on the background. Oh
That's
no.
awesome.
I swear to God, aren't the Doomstars right here? Oh my gosh, that's funny. Okay,
Oh my
so
gosh.
I
It's like
should,
protected. It's like it's gone invisible.
yeah,
I think that's funny.
I'm actually part of the band now. Um, So there's a new movie. It's wrapping up the series. It's 10 years in the making. Well, maybe not 10 years in the making, but it's been 10 years since the Requiem for the Doomstar. So why don't you tell us a little bit? I know we're the other thing I want to do is a caveat that the WGA and the SAG after are still on strike, so there's certain things that we cannot discuss. But I think we can discuss the as a producer and a director and the music writer, how did this last chapter of the series come about?
First of all, my dog is clearing its throat.
That's awesome.
She has a one of the worst voices, but she's so wonderful. Um, Now she's back asleep. But okay. Well, this so I had this idea for a long time. And I was ready to do it right after we finished the Doomstar Requiem. And I thought the series owed a conclusion. And I think but this is TV. It doesn't always happen that way. Any day could be your last. And so we did this 1 hour long rock opera special, and then nothing happened for a long time. And I told the fans, and the fans got very upset. And they kind of formed a group and said, "Hey, give us our show back." And then somebody asked me recently. They said, "So that fan kind of like that whole fan cavalcade that didn't work, huh?" And at first I answered, I said, "I guess it didn't." But now I realize, of course it did, because we're here right now talking about it, and we would not be here if there wasn't a big fan group that pushed this thing forward. So somewhere around 2019, I get a phone call, and they say, "Hey, would you like to?" It was Adult Swim. They say, "Would you like to bring Dethklok to the stage for this big festival?" And I said, "Yes." The answer is yes. Let's figure it out. Let's sort it out. Let's make it work. And it had been a while since we'd played live, and so it all started 2019. It's a really important show, and I just thought, this is probably, if we do this well and we really take it seriously, I bet we can kick some doors open and maybe have this conversation about this final feature. So we do the show. It's a one-off. One-offs are really scary if you haven't done a one-off before. Every band member that's ever done a one-off hates it because you have to practice like crazy, and you got one shot, and you don't really get a lot of time to really kind of get it all up and run. I mean, you do, but when you're on tour, you have an opportunity to do the perfect show every single night, which is exciting. So it's treacherous. We're playing for like maybe 20,000 people, and we're headlining an entire festival, and we haven't. It's like being in an office job, and all of a sudden you got to go on stage. So that's kind of what it's like. And the show's really cool. It looks great. It sounds great. I'm really happy to be on stage with all these people, Gene Hoglan, Neely Brosh, and Pete Griffin. I owe them a lot for being a part of this thing, because that kind of reawakened Metalocalypse. So somewhere in early 2020, I get another call, and they say, "Hey, that went well. What if we did this kind of a thing, kind of a movie thing?" And I said, "Movie? First of all, I was going to say yes anyway, but now that I know that it's a feature and a record and a soundtrack album, and that's, to me, I'm always looking for a good challenge, and I'm also looking for a reason to come back into this thing and do something we haven't done before, and the feature is the answer, and the way that we want to do the feature is the answer." So we start putting the deal together, and I'm looking at the deal, and I'm thinking, this deal's going to work out. I'm looking at it, we're not too far off. And so I grab my guitar, and I know I've got a Dethklok record that I'm gonna have to I'm gonna be owed, and it's gonna be different than any other Dethklok record, because normally I would write a song for every single episode and then collect them, elongate them, put them on a record. In this case, it's all got to be completely brand new original music. And it's really hard to kind of do an anthology of brand new music, especially if it's not a rock opera. That's why I tell a story with music, because it makes music writing easier, because I've got one character's theme, another character's theme, this kind of thing, a turn, and you mix them all together, and it makes it a little bit more organized or easy to organize. So
Right.
in this case, I knew I had a lot of music to write, and they all had to be unique, push the band into the a modern era, and sonically, and arrangement wise, and just in brutality, push it, make it more heavy, make it more intense, because this movie's going to be heavier, this movie's going to be more intense. And so the whole thing starts. And the metaphor I've been using is, it's almost like, because we had so much stuff to do at the same time, it's like being working in a kitchen, and you're slow roasting something that's going to take a really long time. And then in the meantime, you're prepping a lot of dishes. You may even be growing a plant where you're going to be mincing its leaves later on. So it takes a lot of stuff. But at the end, you have to serve it all when it's ready and it's prepared and it's hot. And that's what right now is. We've prepared everything, it's hot, and it's ready to go out the door, and you go and eat it. So that's where we went. So basically 2019 is kind of when, and early 2020 is kind of much earlier. And then it took us from then to now, it's 2023, to put the whole thing out. So that's another 3 years. So it took about 7 years, I'd say, really. But it took 3 years to make it.
So when you're directing an animated special, what is your role in that? Like, are you getting the storyboards together? Are you, personally putting the cameras in the right spaces? How do you organize all of that work?
Well, there are two things. So first of all, this is a non-WGA thing. So as the writer, I am I'm a person who's really trying to build a blueprint, and I'm trying to make sure I've got the story elements that I need. I'm also an optimistic person, where I'm trying to say, oh, this can happen and this can happen. All this crazy, cool, visual, exciting stuff can happen. And so I'm optimistic. And when I'm a producer director, I am more of a pragmatist, where I ask, how the hell are we going to make this work? How with the money that we have, how are we going to make this visually come together? And by the way, visually, I want to push this to the next level. I want this to look bigger, more exciting, be more beautiful, be more cinematic than the TV show, because I'm thinking the TV show is Star Trek, the TV show, and our movie is the Star Trek, the motion picture, so different tones, right? One of them's a little bit more plucky, a little bit sillier, a little bit more flip. This one's a little bit more bigger gravitas, more dramatic, more operatic, right? So I'm thinking, okay, it's my job to build a team with people that have worked on the show, bring in some new people, and this is kind of what I want to do as a director, and build a visual ideology with the group, talk about other directors, talk about cinematographers, talk about the mood and the feeling of the picture, So what does it feel like to watch this stuff? I like movies that are experiential, like Kubrick, where you get kind of lost or hypnotized inside of the movie. And so that's where we started. How do you start out with hypnosis? How do we hypnotize someone? Well, I know Kubrick used music to hypnotize people and visuals. So we start with the first downbeat. We're already trying to hypnotize you. It's almost like somebody swinging a pocket watch in front of you, slowly saying, count backwards to 10 and get lost in this crazy dream that you're about to see, this crazy nightmare or glorious dream between, gods and earthlings and all this kind of crazy stuff. So that's where we start. And then I work with not only an animation team, I work with compositors. And compositors, in this case, the lead compositor is Brian Weeder. Brian Weeder is a guy I met through making a live action video for a project called Galacticon. I wanted to do an all practical video that was live action, that felt like it was made in the early 80s or something. And I wanted to kind of use all the realistic effects. My brother's named Jeff Small, and he works in makeup effects. So he can kind of build anything that I could ask for. We just had to plan for it. So we employed a bunch of really cool techniques. I learned a lot more visual stuff. I got behind a live action camera, and I just kind of got to explore and develop visual language over the past, 7 years or so, right? And so I take all that stuff, all this live action and practical and analog stuff, and I push it into the animation world. And I say, how can I get Metalocalypse but elevated? And so the answer is also, my brother being a sculptor, I wanted to get new angles from the characters, put the cameras in different directions, put the cameras in different angles, rather. So I'm on the floor with a camera, like how Terry Gilliam would shoot up in time bands, like strange angles. Get the camera up so I can get cool 3/4 down shots. I can never do this in the TV series because we didn't have the money or the time. In this case, in this movie, if we plan it out right, we can do whatever we want. We just have to solve this ticking time bomb before it explodes. My brother is sculpting 3D heads in 3D in like a ZBrush of all the characters, and we're employing those to kind of build models and to put cameras around and start building the worlds and the interior, the exterior. Not only while that's happening, I'm meeting with storyboard artists who are intensely talented, and we've never had storyboard artists this good. And we've got a team of people who are challenged, who are basically what I want to do, and what the ultimate thing I can do is challenge everybody and have them kind of compete to see who's got the coolest sequence, right? And I kind of want to pit them against each other, but it's really great because when you have really talented people kind of looking over the shoulder and saying, okay, what are they doing? What are they doing? What's my sequence? How do I make my sequence cooler than theirs? But still tell the story ultimately. And then, so we have a lot of that going on. So we had a team of storyboard artists that were really talented and brought a lot of cinematic quality, emotion, and just visual art to this world that we hadn't really had before. So that was an exciting and important kind of I guess foundational part of building the movie. And I'm also just talking about directors. I'm talking about camera shots. I'm talking about like elements in the air, like from Kurosawa, who has like rain or wind or tumultuous things happening while the character is, in a crisis point. Building that out, you'll see that in the movie. We do that throughout it, like leaves blowing in the air during a kind of a mental breakdown of one of the characters, rain, fire, smoke, snow, all kinds of stuff. So we're thinking elementally, and again, experiential, having the sound for all that stuff reflecting too. So again, if you're in your 5.1 and you're listening to this movie, which I highly recommend if you have the Blu-ray and you have a 5.1 system, it's mixed for that. It really is mixed to be a home version of a cinematic experience. So all of those things are kind of constantly swirling around, and again, we're trying to, in the early stages, build little experiments so we can say, hey, you've never seen this version of Skwisgaar before, take a look at this. And there's Toki in the background, and there's this mist and this haze and this kind of like this all of this kind of like accoutrement that helps build something a little bit more exciting. And we want you to take this episode, this movie a little with, again, I want you to feel it differently than how the other ones felt, because this is the big finish, and we're just trying to honor it as much as we can. So that's what directing is to me: is what does this movie feel like? What is the tempo of this movie? How do I keep everything moving in the right direction? And with I'm also stuck within 80 minutes. Because that's kind of the deal that we're doing, is that it has to be 80 minutes or it puts us in another like price bracket or tax bracket or something like that. Right. So I've got to honor all these, I guess you'd call them parameters, and I think within those parameters, you have to get creative, and you're also asking yourself as the director, what's my budget? What's my best use of it? If I have a really cool animated sequence, that means if I put a lot of money there, that means I can't put money there. But if I can't put money there, how can I make it look as cool as I possibly can without the budget? So what is that? So and then I'll have these Zoom calls. So we have all these people. And then at some point I'll get like the lead animator, Mike Rouse, shaking his head saying, what you're asking for is impossible. And I said, okay, why? Tell me why. And then he goes, well, because at this point, if you have this and that, and then I go, okay, let's get smart. Let's solve that problem right now. What can we do with what we have, and how cool can we make that look? So that's all of filmmaking, from what I understand. Once you go through the trenches of like one movie and you see any other director that's ever done something, you realize that you have a kinship with them because they had to make something out of nothing. They had to make it work. And that's what a director does. At the end of this, the director's job is, how the hell am I going to make any of this work and make it entertaining for an audience, and make it emotional where it needs to be, make it dire where it needs to be, make it funny where it needs to be, and how do I land all those things and do it in a way where we can all stand behind it and fold our arms and go, yeah, that's cool. And so go ahead.
I was gonna say, one of the things I really enjoyed on the behind the scenes, talking about the backgrounds in the movie, is that technique you guys use with the two fish tanks, and the compositing, and so that it really gave that more operatic depth, like Kubrickian style of movie
Yeah.
background where the characters doing what they're doing, but this gorgeous backdrop.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm glad you brought that up. So the ink tanks. This is an old technique. So this is something I remember being a kid in the movie theater seeing Flash Gordon the movie when, I was probably 5 years old.
Hmm.
And I was in the theater and after listening to Queen's music and all that crazy, powerful harmonized guitars. And then at some point we're in the sky and we're flying around. And I thought, oh my God, this is the most gorgeous expressionistic kind of piece that I've ever seen. This is so cool. And it stuck with me, and I would recognize it showing up in movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark. I would recognize it in Empire Strikes Back. I would recognize it in Poltergeist, Ghostbusters, all these monumentally cool movies that had these really great practical effects. And by the way, this is something I wanted to do since episode 1 of Metalocalypse. And we just never got around to it. We just
Right.
once we started production, we're like, oh, everything's on fire, and we're trying to put it out and just try to make a show at the same time. So we had an aquarium sitting on the top. Like I remember Chris Prodowski from Titmouse got a small aquarium and he put it on the top of a shelf, and he had and it just sat there and collected dust for the entirety of Metalocalypse until I went in and did this Galacticon video called what is that song called? The Agenda is what the song is. And you can see it on YouTube. It's like I'm Funny or Die. And but that's where I started. I just thought, I was sitting there with my brother and I was saying, let's do our own thing. Let's build some stuff. You know how to do practical effects. I want to get behind a camera. I want to expand my visual ideology as much as I can. Let's get our hands dirty. Animation sucks because we're indoors all day. We don't get to go run around and get dirty. Now let's go run around and get dirty. And then my question is for the Metalocalypse movie: how do we all get to run around and get dirty? How do we humbling above, the base, trying to show animators what I was looking for in one sequence. So you're just trying to get out of your room, go participate, and it's really exciting. That all the footage you see in the featurette is a group of myself, my brother, Brian Weeder, and a really crucial part of this movie too, Andrew Kevin Walker, who is the writer of the movie Seven, and he wrote Sleepy Hollow amongst other movies. He just wrote the newest David Fincher movie that's coming out this fall called The Killer. So anyway, he's my neighbor, he's my friend. And he is to help me kind of find the foundation of this movie. And he could have left after that, but he was so excited by this project. He kept showing up in meetings, and I was like, please come. And I've got a quick change. I need to talk to you. Can you listen to me for a second? And can you tell me why I'm crazy or I'm wrong to do this? And we would sit and discuss. So it was really amazing having someone with a brain that big, who is such an excited person, who is such an important part of cinematic history at this point, because Seven is one of the most perfectly uses every piece of the buffalo to tell a story that just surprises us, And so there he is also with us on Ink Tank Day, as excited as ever, watching something that he also knows, all the movies that he loved, he grew up loving, employ all these techniques. So we built that there. The results are crazy. They're very cool. And you get something that feels like it's tactile inside of this animation world, because animation can look a little clean. I mean, you look at animation now, sometimes it gets so vector based and so clean that it feels like it's just inhuman at some point. There's no there's no messiness in it. And what we were trying to really build was, we were actually going up and chewing up pieces of animation to make them feel like they were a little bit more analog. And we were looking back to, again, old Disney, Fantasia, which I think is one of the most gorgeous things that's ever been committed to.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, Fantasia is an important part of, to me, music and storytelling and visuals, because it's so gorgeous. And again, dire, huge demons and fairies and all kinds of cool dances and all that stuff. To me, that's so cinematic. So we thought about old Disney all the time. We thought about Ralph Bakshi, who did Fire and Ice, who did Lord of the Rings, who did American pop, and we thought about heavy metal, Ivan Reitman's heavy metal, and all that stuff was just we don't want to borrow from now. We want to borrow from then, from very far back, and see what we can do and build something new out of all these old pieces that were just tried and true, and again, just make animation a little bit more exciting to us. And so that challenge of trying to build that feeling is the challenge that makes everyone go, okay, do I accept this challenge? Is my job gonna be a little bit more difficult, but is it worth it? And the team starts gelling at that point. And that's some of the most exciting thing you can do. And that's, to me, that's the reason of doing all that stuff, is because of how fun it is to solve this brain puzzle with a group of people who really care. And that, by the way, that goes all the way to the music. So that kind of like creative teamwork is so important, from like when we go to on tour, when we have front of house monitors, the band itself, but all the people that help the band, from like tour managers to everything. We're all one big team. Same with building the records. Gene Hoglan and myself and Ulrich Wild are a team, and the mastering team that's all part of the same team. So we also are throwing down gauntlets and challenging each other. Can we do this? Can we make it better? Can we make it more satisfying, intense? Can we tell a story better, from music to visual to story, all that stuff. So that is the real, as a director, that's the gift that you get, is that you get to do it, And so I savor it. It's terrifying. I go to sleep afraid. I wake up afraid, but it's fun. It's the other description I use is like, it's like your parents caught you smoking, so they make you smoke the whole pack to teach you a lesson,
Right.
So I'm smoking all the guitars I've ever smoked. I'm smoking all the voiceover, all the writing, all the directing, all the producing, all the music, all the scoring. And at the end, you're sick, but you're also addicted. So there's that. So you got to do it again as soon as possible, and go get caught smoking again and smoke another whole pack.
So I actually wanted to segue into the music. So without giving too much of a spoiler about the film, part of the plot is Nathan having to write the Song of Salvation, because the whole prophecy of the band and the end of the whatever is coming.
Yes.
The song that he comes up with, that I can't reveal because you've released it as a single, is Aortic Desecration. Excuse me. I keep wanting to say aortic dissection, but it's aortic desecration.
Yeah.
So
talk
about, if you can, without giving too much of the plot away, talk about developing that song as one of the key points of the movie.
In this song, I needed it to be a self-inflicted wound. I needed it to be an egomaniacal tantrum of someone who got wounded, but wounded themselves. The aortic desecration, aortic, the heart, desecration, breaking. It's a heartbreak song. Really. What if Cannibal Corpse wrote a song about heartbreak? So that's why it's aortic desecration. And so every lyric is just punishing and beating yourself up, and it's all about ego, and it's a tantrum. It's a heavy metal, infuriated, demonic tantrum. And that's what I thought was necessary to be in this particular part of the movie, because that's what this is about. This is about a character and their embattled ego, and pushing, hopefully, being challenged and given an opportunity to not be that, right. And this is also about an artist in creative crisis, because we have this character in Act One, Nathan Explosion, who is after the Doomstar Requiem, we find him in a state of kind of post-traumatic stress, and he's in this kind of professional and romantic flat spin when he is given the task through this prophecy to write a song that may or may not save this planet.
Right.
And so can you get, like, when you have a deadline and you have emotional distress, how do you push through that, or do you use it, or what do you do? So that's kind of the, like, this is always a show, believe it or not, about a family that happens to be a bunch of dipshit brothers, like the Lost Boys more than anything, right? Who don't have a mother or father, that must become the mother and father, that must kind of, like, in order to land this, will they be able to become big boys? Because the first episode really is about making a bunch of big boys making their own dinner. After the 6-star chef, pardon me for a second. After their 6-star chef gets exploded, how do they find a way to Sorry, there's a leak in my thing
Oh, no
over
worries.
here. It's all right. You may hear a metronomic tempo of air conditioning water going into a cup. Anyway, so yeah, so this is always a story about a bunch of teenage dipshits in grown men costumes negotiating their way through celebrity, and potentially coming out the other end or being destroyed and consumed by it, and or both, who knows. So that's kind of the underlying kind of concept, is that um from episode 1 to the last episode, will they fulfill that? Is that part of the prophecy too?
And then I guess my final question would be, is there anything that you would like to be asked that you've never been asked before? Like, is there a question you wish someone would ask you and you've never been asked it?
No, I can't say that I'm not. But here's what it's really funny, but this whole process, I'm going out and I'm talking about this whole process because we've never really talked about the making of the show before. We never really talked about, like, what the characters are doing and what the arc is, or what is meant to come of this. So I've always kept that very quiet. And I mean, even now I'm not talking about it very much because I'm trying to not spoil the movie.
Right.
But what's really fun is the thing that I like to talk about all the time anyway with my friends who are creative, with writers and directors and actors that I know. I'm always just talking about creativity and trying to throw a saddle onto my own creativity and understand it more, and to be able to do it better and to get better at my job. So the questions that I'm being asked on this cycle are all about the creative process. And to me, that's so much fun to talk about because I really care about that. And it helps me understand myself, and it helps me understand my friends, and how to work with the tapestry that is, the crew, the actual instruments that I have to use, from guitars to a mixing board to a microphone to an edit bay, all that stuff. It's all really important for me to understand it and to talk about creativity and how the process works, because ultimately I think that's what I'm here to do, is to be creative and to keep telling stories that are like an important personal story tucked inside of a crazy world that's either some kind of a family that's creative, home movies, or Metalocalypse, which is another different creative family, that's grown up and more curt and rude and, less understanding of the world, and myopic and idiotic. And it's treacherous, but also kind of fun to, again, finally land the whole thing at the end.
It's really funny comparison because the kids in home movies are kids, so their understanding of the world is limited by how long they've been alive. Whereas we've got, like you said, teenagers in man suits in Dethklok, and they're just oblivious idiots to what's going around. They're the seventh most, was it the seventh highest economy in the world?
The seventh largest economy. Yeah.
Yeah, and but they can't make their own meals, or they
exactly. Yeah, and home movies is children that spoke like adults and behaved like adults, kind of. They had like a thought process, and they were kind of, they spoke quietly to each other. Metalocalypse is loud adults behaving like children. So yeah, I never really saw the connection until I was knee deep in Metalocalypse and going like, oh, wait a minute, I like telling stories where people have to be creative in these worlds, and it's about those creative relationships, because ultimately, like it or not, like, even when we're making a show, we're having those creative relationships, So Metalocalypse would even start to kind of echo the making of Metalocalypse at some point. Somebody would be the murder face. Somebody would be the Toki. Somebody would be the Swiss guy. Oh boy, something happened at work today. It's so funny that we have to like bring a conversation started about creativity that we have to like consider and think about and see if we can to make it funny in our show, or because there's something true underneath all that stuff. And that's Metalocalypse is so bombastic and so over the top. There's so much like crazy stuff that happened in the world that we were kind of saying also, like, look, we didn't invent any of this stuff. We're exaggerating stuff that's already happened. We're regurgitating what we're seeing on cable TV, from like VH1 classics, Where Are They Now, to Celebrity Rehab, to like all these things. Again, going back to the early 2000s. and trying to make sense of like, or just kind of show what we're seeing. We're just showing the world an exaggerated version of what it's showing us. And at that time, it's loud, it's aggressive, it's post 9/11, or a whole country who's gotten its ego just crushed, and we don't know what to do, and so we're kind of resorting to something more crazy and bombastic. The internet is young. Everyone is seeing porn everywhere. People start dressing like porn stars in the early 2000s. And it's porn and death metal and celebrity and Metalocalypse.
On that crazy note, I
Yeah.
want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate you taking out your time to talk to us. Hope that someday you can come back and we can talk more in depth about the things that we're not allowed to discuss because of the strikes.
Well, I would love to. Yeah, I'd love to.
I gotta look up the date because I'm terrible with it. When does the DVD and Blu-ray and the digital come out? August 22nd?
August 22nd.
Yes.
We're like in the final countdown now. So August 22nd is the movie, the record, Death Album 4, and the score album, which I'm really excited about. The soundtrack, which I think they all kind of really do something that the other thing can't do. Death Album 4 is brutality and music and just intensity and mysticism and expansiveness. The movie is emotion and character, and the score is beautiful, more beautiful music, you know, just something to counterbalance. They're all kind of counterbalancing each other, all keeping each other in place. So I really think of the trifecta of these projects coming out are worth, if you like one, I'd say check out the whole thing because it's meant to be one big piece.
Plus, we can see you live soon.
Yes, and you'll see me on tour with Baby Metal and Dethklok. Yeah, the Baby Clock tour, and that's starting now. So I mean, we go into rehearsals next week, and then we go on the road, and I finally leave this room that I've been trapped in. I call it my punishment cave, and I get to go outside and see the whole America, and I have had this wanderlust. I've been dreaming of just driving around the country, and now I finally get to do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today. And that's it for me and the Nerd Element, Metalocalypse, the Army of the Doomstars coming out soon. Check it out, you guys. Thanks.